My wife lied about her job and spent thousands while I worked double shifts, so I took our house and left her alone. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I've always believed that hard work could fix anything, even love. From the moment I met Vanessa, I felt like I'd finally found someone who matched my drive and ambition, someone who made me want to give everything I had without thinking twice. She had this way of smiling that made the room feel smaller, warmer, like the rest of the world disappeared when she laughed. Early on, she confided in me about being unemployed, about rent piling up, student loans, and bills she couldn't manage on her own. "I don't know how I'd get through this without you," she said one evening, her voice trembling, and I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodding like it was natural, like helping her was instinct. I wanted to be that person for her, the guy who made problems disappear. I started working double shifts, barely noticing the exhaustion creeping into my bones. The smell of the coffee shop at 2 a.m., the hum of fluorescent lights, the click of the register, they became my second home. And I told myself it was temporary, that it was love, that sacrifice was part of being a partner. "It's just for now," I muttered to myself more than once, staring at my laptop as I logged our shared expenses, trying to balance her debts with mine, convinced I was building a future together. But there were moments that gnawed at me, little things I tried to ignore. "I just have some projects I'm finishing," she'd say whenever I asked about work, glancing at her phone with a quick, fleeting smile. "And there were charges on our joint card, small at first, then larger, always explained away with vague excuses." I brushed them off, thinking maybe I was overthinking, that love meant trust, that my job was to support, not judge. Still, a quiet unease began to settle in my chest, a whisper I tried to silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that the generosity I poured out, every late night, every skipped meal, every exhausted morning, might not be met with gratitude but something far darker. And I had no idea how much it would cost me. Things started to unravel slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. I noticed little inconsistencies in Vanessa's stories about her projects. One night, I asked, "Didn't you have a meeting today with that client?" She paused, fingers tapping her phone nervously, and said, Yeah, it got rescheduled." The tone wasn't defensive, it was almost too smooth, like a practiced line she expected me to swallow without question. My stomach sank, but I told myself I was overreacting. I wanted to trust her, I needed to trust her, because love meant believing the best in the person you chose. But then the signs multiplied. Packages started arriving, addressed to her, sometimes to our apartment lobby, sometimes to our door without explanation. I'd ask casually, "Who's this from?" and she'd laugh lightly, brushing it off. "Just some stuff I ordered online for, work," she said, her eyes darting to the side. I felt a twinge of doubt, but it wasn't full-blown panic yet, just a nagging itch I couldn't scratch. And every time I confronted her gently about finances, she'd sigh, weary but charming, "You worry too much. Everything's fine." At the same time, my own life was collapsing into exhaustion. I was working double shifts, skipping meals, barely seeing sunlight, and the apartment smelled like burnt coffee and late-night takeout. The hum of my laptop became my background soundtrack, the endless clicking of spreadsheets marking the hours I spent trying to hold our lives together. And while I was exhausted, Vanessa seemed to glide through the days, fresh, put together, always a step ahead. There were moments when I caught a flicker of guilt in her eyes, but it never lasted long. A laugh, a touch on my shoulder, a whispered, "Thank you for everything," would erase the suspicion for a day or two. But the unease lingered, gnawing quietly at my chest. Deep down, I knew the truth of what I was ignoring was about to crash into my life, but I had no idea just how far the deception went, or how much it would cost me when the curtain finally lifted. By the time I realized how much I was carrying, it was already suffocating. I was paying all the bills, covering groceries, and even slipping cash for little emergencies Vanessa claimed were urgent, while she insisted she was actively job hunting. The apartment smelled faintly of laundry detergent and vanilla candles she liked to burn when I came home exhausted from double shifts, as if that could mask everything I was silently drowning under. I remember staring at the credit card statements late at night, eyes burning, and thinking, this can't all be coincidence. Then there were the little indulgences. I'd come home to find packages from high-end stores, shoes, handbags, fancy kitchen gadgets. Just treating myself, she said once, tossing a smug smile my way. And the truth hit me like a punch. She had been living a lifestyle far beyond our means, while I scraped and saved every hour of overtime just to keep us afloat. My heart sank as I realized I was shouldering the weight of our entire lives, and she was barely lifting a finger. I tried to speak to her about it once, hesitating at the doorway while she hummed in the kitchen. "Vanessa, can we talk about the spending? About the money?" I asked, voice tight. She looked up, eyes wide, feigning shock. "I can't believe you're bringing this up again," she said. "I'm trying, I really am. You make everything sound like a crisis." Her tone wasn't just defensive, it was condescending, and it cut deeper than I expected. The emotional exhaustion started to gnaw at me. I would lie awake, the faint hum of the city outside our window matching the constant ache in my chest, wondering how I could have missed the signs for so long. Every red flag I'd brushed aside now screamed at me in silence. And somewhere deep down, I knew the generosity I thought was love might have been enabling something much darker. I just didn't yet know how far it had gone, or when the reckoning would finally come. It all came crashing down one rainy Thursday evening. I had just finished logging our monthly expenses when I noticed something that made my stomach twist into knots. A hidden credit card, one I never opened, one she never mentioned, was maxed out. Thousands of dollars charged in a single month, purchases I had no idea existed. I felt like the floor had been ripped from beneath me, the fluorescent light of my home office flickering over statements I couldn't unsee. I confronted her immediately, voice shaking, but my words barely came out coherent. "Vanessa, what is this? Why didn't you tell me?" Her reaction was the calmest I had ever seen, and that terrified me more than anger ever could. She tilted her head, a small, practiced smile forming. "Oh, it's just for some work stuff. I didn't want to bother you," she said lightly, like this was a trivial misunderstanding, not a betrayal that cut through the hours I had poured into keeping us afloat. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, heart racing, sweat beading on my forehead despite the chill of the apartment. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand the truth, but her tone had a way of diffusing confrontation, twisting guilt into my chest. The apartment felt smaller that night, every corner pressing down on me. The faint smell of burnt coffee from my endless shifts lingered, mixing with the vanilla candles she always lit to freshen the mood. I realized in that moment that my world, my sacrifices, had been quietly siphoned off while I worked myself to exhaustion. I couldn't trust her words anymore, and the weight of our shared life pressed harder than it ever had before. I sank into the couch, staring at the rain streaking our windows, and understood the truth I had been trying to ignore: this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't forgetfulness. This was deception. And whatever came next, it wasn't going to be easy. It hit me like a punch I didn't see coming, the full scope of her lies. I started digging through old emails, invoices, and receipts I'd never paid attention to, thinking maybe I had misunderstood something. And then I saw it: Vanessa hadn't been unemployed at all. She'd been freelancing for months, pocketing thousands, covering her expenses, and pretending to struggle. The realization left me numb, staring at the glowing screen as my hands trembled. I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, and poured my soul into keeping us afloat, while she was living comfortably, all under my nose. I confronted her again, voice tight, barely recognizable even to myself. "You lied about everything. The job, the bills, how could you do this to me?" I demanded, heart hammering in my chest. Her response was almost worse than the betrayal itself. She smirked briefly, then said, "I needed space to figure things out, okay? You make everything about stress and control." The audacity of it cut me deeper than any money she stole. It was deliberate, calculated, and utterly dismissive of the life I had built for us. The apartment felt suffocating that night, the walls closing in as I replayed every sacrifice I'd made. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock on the wall, even the faint scent of her perfume, it all mocked me in silence. I realized I had been blind, trusting a person who had systematically taken advantage of my loyalty. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands, thinking about everything I had given, my energy, my savings, my trust. The anger simmered, hot and sharp, but beneath it was a growing resolve. Something inside me shifted that night. I knew I couldn't just keep letting this happen. And for the first time, I started planning how to reclaim control over my life, though I had no idea how far I'd have to go. I hit a point I never thought I would, complete emotional collapse. I remember collapsing onto the couch, staring at the rain streaking down our windows, feeling every ounce of exhaustion, betrayal, and heartbreak pressed down on me at once. My double shifts had left me hollow, and now the revelation of Vanessa's lies drained what little energy I had left. I couldn't sleep, my mind raced with every conversation, every package, every bill I had paid thinking I was helping, while she had been living comfortably on her own deception. I tried talking to friends, family, anyone who would listen, but the words felt hollow when I said them aloud. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I've been living in a lie, I confessed one night over the phone, voice barely above a whisper. They offered advice, but it felt like watching someone else's life, not mine. I couldn't escape the gnawing guilt, the shame that I hadn't seen it sooner, that I'd let my trust be weaponized. Vanessa, of course, noticed the cracks. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "You're being dramatic again," she said casually. Her words stabbed me. It wasn't just the money or the lies, it was her knowing how much this hurt and twisting it into my fault. I remember pacing our tiny apartment, the faint scent of burnt coffee from my last late-night shift still lingering, the hum of the refrigerator echoing like a metronome counting my failures. I felt trapped, isolated, and powerless, like every ounce of loyalty I had poured into this marriage had been turned against me. And that's when it hit me, the anger that had simmered quietly in the background now roared. I realized I couldn't stay in this state any longer. Something had to change, but I didn't know if I had the strength, or the plan, to make it happen. After nights of staring at the ceiling, I knew I had to stop feeling powerless. I started documenting everything, bank statements, credit card charges, receipts, texts, and emails, turning my suspicions into undeniable proof. Every late-night click of the mouse, every tiny detail I had ignored before now became evidence. The apartment felt different somehow, like the walls weren't closing in anymore. I had a plan, and that gave me a strange, simmering sense of control. I watched her carefully, noting patterns in her behavior, the way she always left packages hidden until I wasn't looking, the excuses she repeated when I asked about work. "It's just for a client," she'd say, her voice smooth, but I had the receipts, the invoices, the dates all lined up perfectly. I felt a mix of anger and clarity, a cold, methodical focus replacing the earlier despair. The exhaustion from my double shifts faded slightly under the adrenaline of having a plan. I remember one night sitting at the kitchen table, dim light from the lamp casting shadows across my notes, thinking, I've been blind, but not anymore. My hands trembled as I arranged evidence, every spreadsheet and photo a reminder of how much I had given and how much she had taken. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, all became part of a landscape I was now navigating with eyes wide open. I began imagining the confrontation, not angry, not emotional, but precise, undeniable, unavoidable. I could see her face when she realized I knew everything. And more than that, I could imagine taking back control of the life I had built while she had been playing pretend. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, power. But I knew it had to be done carefully. One wrong move, one slip, and everything I had planned could crumble. And the night I decided to act was creeping closer, silent and inevitable. The confrontation came on a night thick with tension, the kind that makes the air feel heavy and every sound too sharp. I laid everything out on the dining table, spreadsheets, invoices, screenshots of messages, credit card statements, proof she could no longer deny. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint smell of vanilla candles did nothing to soften the truth. I watched her face as I spoke, every word precise, calm, but weighted with years of betrayal. "Vanessa. I know everything," I said, my voice steady even though my chest ached. "The freelancing you claimed didn't exist, the packages, the charges, all of it. You've been lying to me this entire time while I worked myself to exhaustion to support us both." For a moment, she froze, her eyes flicking between the papers and mine, searching for a way out. I didn't mean," she started, but the words were weak, empty, unconvincing. Her defenses crumbled as I kept going, showing the timeline, the receipts, the evidence of deliberate deception. "I trusted you," I said quietly, the emotion breaking through for just a second. "I gave everything I had because I believed in us. And you took it all." The apartment felt smaller, tighter, as if it shared in my rage. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the papers, but I pulled them back, not a single ounce of hesitation. The silence that followed was suffocating. No excuses could repair this, no apology could erase the months of manipulation. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not the playful kind, but the raw realization that I wasn't the man she could control anymore. I took a slow breath, letting the truth sink into the space between us. And in that pause, I knew that reclaiming my life would require more than confrontation, it would require action. The night was far from over, and the reckoning I had planned was about to begin. The next morning, I started reclaiming control, piece by piece. First, I secured our home, changed the locks, updated the security system, and froze access to our joint accounts. I felt a strange mix of relief and vindication as I did it, the hum of the refrigerator and the faint smell of coffee from my exhausted mornings now carrying a sense of empowerment instead of dread. Every action was deliberate, a silent statement that the balance of power had shifted. Vanessa paced nervously around the apartment, realizing for the first time that she had lost control. "What are you doing?" she demanded, voice sharp but laced with panic. I didn't answer immediately. I let her words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of her betrayal. "This is my life," I finally said, calm but unwavering. "And you're not in it the way you think you are anymore." The realization hit her slowly, like a door creaking open to a room she had never intended to enter. She tried to negotiate, to guilt-trip me, but I had rehearsed every word, every boundary, every refusal. Her usual charm and deflection had no power here. The apartment, once suffocating, now felt spacious, quiet, and mine. Even as I moved her belongings out, the sting of betrayal lingered, but it was tempered by the clarity of action. I realized I didn't need to yell or fight, every move I made was a silent, unassailable assertion of control. The exhaustion from double shifts faded slightly under the rush of reclaiming what she had tried to take. By the end of the day, the house felt like my sanctuary again. I stood in the kitchen, sunlight spilling through the blinds, and let the moment settle. But even as I felt the first sparks of freedom, I knew the emotional battle wasn't over. Vanessa's presence might be gone, but the aftermath, the trust shattered, the deception revealed, would linger, and I was just beginning to confront it fully. Once Vanessa was gone, the apartment felt quiet in a way I hadn't realized I'd missed. The faint scent of vanilla candles lingered, but it no longer masked tension, it felt like a reminder of how close I had come to losing myself. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee I didn't have to rush through, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The exhaustion from double shifts, the endless worry, the emotional turmoil, it all began to melt away. I realized freedom didn't come from confrontation alone, it came from reclaiming space, boundaries, and control over my own life. Her attempts to contact me came shortly after. Calls, texts, even emails filled with apologies, explanations, and pleas for understanding. "Please, we can fix this," one message read, dripping with manipulative guilt. But I didn't respond. I had learned the hard way that her words were empty, a tool to draw me back into the chaos I had finally escaped. I realized my peace was worth more than her excuses, more than the illusion of a shared life built on lies. I started organizing my finances, separating accounts, and creating a safety net I could finally trust. Each step, automatic bill payments, locked savings, a clear budget, felt like reclaiming my independence piece by piece. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint morning light through the blinds, even the quiet of the empty rooms became a backdrop for rebuilding. I was no longer living for someone else's deception, I was living for me. And in those small, mundane victories, I began to understand something profound: betrayal had been a wake-up call, not a life sentence. I was free, not because she left or because I took action, but because I chose to protect myself first. The road ahead would take time to heal fully, but for the first time, I felt in control, whole, and unshakable. Even as I set down the last of her belongings, I knew this was only the beginning of reclaiming everything she had tried to take. Rebuilding my life felt surreal at first, like stepping into a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. I started with small things, organizing my apartment, setting up routines that weren't dictated by her whims, and rediscovering hobbies I had abandoned during months of stress. Each step was a reminder that I was no longer trapped, no longer bending to accommodate lies and manipulation. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft morning light, even the smell of coffee became symbols of control and stability instead of exhaustion and betrayal. I also began addressing the deeper wounds. Therapy helped me untangle the guilt I had carried for trusting her, for not seeing the signs sooner, and for believing that love meant endless sacrifice. I realized I had allowed her deception to define me, and it was time to reclaim my narrative. Each session, each reflection, made me stronger, more aware, and more determined to protect myself in the future. My finances, once a source of anxiety, were now a tool of empowerment. I created separate accounts, invested in things I had postponed, and finally felt secure knowing my hard work couldn't be undermined again. The satisfaction was quiet but profound. The freedom to make choices solely for myself, without guilt or manipulation, was intoxicating. Even more, I began reconnecting with friends and family without shame or excuses. The relationships I had neglected during the months of stress flourished as I shared my truth openly, without fear of judgment or disbelief. I felt a growing pride in my resilience, a recognition that I had survived manipulation, deceit, and emotional exhaustion, and had emerged stronger. The anger that had once consumed me had cooled into clarity. I no longer needed revenge in the dramatic sense. My victory was living, thriving, and no longer giving her power over my life. And as I stood in the sunlight streaming through my apartment, I understood something vital. Sometimes the most powerful justice isn't confrontation, it's reclaiming yourself completely. I never expected closure to feel so quiet. Vanessa tried to reach me weeks later, leaving messages full of apologies, promises, and guilt trips, but I didn't respond. Each message sat unread on my phone, a reminder that I had already taken back what she had tried to steal: my life, my peace, my sense of self. I realized that the most satisfying revenge wasn't drama or confrontation, it was living fully and freely without her in it. The apartment, once a place of tension and betrayal, became my sanctuary. Sunlight poured through the blinds in the mornings, the faint hum of the refrigerator sounded almost like music, and even the smell of coffee brewed slowly without rush became a reminder that I was finally in control. I began planning small joys, weekend hikes, dinners with friends, mornings spent reading without guilt. Every mundane choice felt like a victory over the months of manipulation and exhaustion I had endured. I reflected on everything I had lost and everything I had gained. The trust she destroyed had been replaced with clarity, resilience, and boundaries I would never compromise again. I could see the signs now, the subtle lies, the evasive excuses, the packages she hid, but instead of anger, I felt gratitude that I had survived and learned. My world was mine again, no one else had the power to twist it, and that knowledge was liberating. Even as I walked past the empty rooms she once occupied, I felt a quiet triumph. I wasn't just reclaiming material possessions or control over the house, I was reclaiming myself. The betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it had also shown me the strength I didn't know I had. And as I stood in the sunlight streaming through the living room, coffee in hand, I understood the ultimate truth. Sometimes the most profound revenge isn't the act itself, it's walking away, stronger, unbroken, and finally free.